So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a lionfish, and it's going to be using just the simplest stuff. This is a rotary tiki, which isn't even a tiki, it's a paper mate. And this is a normal Stadler eraser that's white, and that's all I need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a fish, and I'm going to talk about how I draw stuff, so that it is an interesting and for hopefully informative, enjoyable video. So what I want to draw today is a lionfish, which is one of the most poisonous fish in the world, but you actually have to get in contact with it. So this is one of the fish that only has the poison to protect itself from predators, and any other reason it doesn't really do much. It just swims. It's a very slow swimmer, and it just kind of glides in the ocean pretty much. And this is one of my favorite fish because of how ornate it is, how detailed the fish itself can be compared to all the other fish in the sea. Now, all fish are beautiful in my opinion, but this is special for me because this doesn't really have too many colors, but what it has is a very unique anatomy, full of barbs and full of little spears all around it. These also have zebra-like, I would say, stripes. This is a fish with stripes, and that makes it beautiful because this fish doesn't really have too much color gradients. It's not hard to color, but it's very relaxing to draw. It's like doing mandala, but instead it's done in the form of the anatomy made by nature, and it's very fun to draw because it is relatively not too hard to actually put on paper, but it is very fun to show to your friends when you draw this, because they are going to like it, because this is a beautiful fish, and you are going to be happy because you have achieved something beautiful. And in the same vein as Bob Ross, even if you make mistakes and it's not anatomically fully correct, it's still a beautiful fish, and in nature no fish is identical. So maybe you made a fish one-to-one without knowing. Maybe this is a fish that actually exists and you just had no idea, and you just made it without knowing that there is a fish exactly like with the fish that you drew. So you can never know. And you have a lot of little details going on with the fish. If you want to draw them, they are very fun. You can always take your time, put some effort, and make this fish even more beautiful than it is. But that's hard because it's one of the most ornate fish in the sea, and it is also one of my most favorite fish because these swim very slowly. They have no rush, they feel no threats, they're just there, they just exist. And this I find very cool because it's just peaceful, minding its own business, and just something that I am very fond of in terms of creatures in nature. And this fish is actually found in tropical waters, which means it likes to be surrounded by hot water, or at least warm water. And so it is only found in places where you see all the colorful other fish, and it fits in. It's not swimming in a sea of gray while being this ornate, this beautiful, and this colorful. And that I find beautiful because it is where it actually made for and where it belongs. It is with other fish that look like it, and it is not sticking out, although it's very detailed. It is still just in an environment that was very suitable for it. The environment that gave rise to this design is also the environment that it exists in and stays by. So the fish is going pretty okay. I would say that the fish body is mostly done. It is a little bit fast how much time it took, but again, I've been drawing for the last, I would say, 20 years now. And so this is just something that I love doing. When I was a little kid, I was always asking the waiters in the restaurants when my parents took me for paper and pen, because I didn't really carry it all around, and my parents were always hoping every single time that I didn't ask, but every single time I did. And so at some point they gave in and got me a small drawing pad with very primitive pencils at first. And they were like, yeah, do what you want. I was very happy with it, because I finally didn't have to be bored out of my mind, since now I had my favorite activity to do, which is drawing. And drawing I did. For years and years, I was drawing very primitive stuff. Like, I remember drawing a box with 2 circles and calling it an American truck, because I was watching a small documentary about mining, and there was this big Caterpillar truck, and I was very impressed by this as a kid. So I was trying to draw this non-stop every single day. It was my life's aim at that point as a little toddler, to draw this American truck, and at the end I could. It was boring at that point. For me, it was boring because, yeah, it's just a mining truck. But little me was very inspired by that. It was big, it was cool, it was just something that I was very inspired by. And so I kept on drawing, and actually I fell in love drawing sea creatures. My favorites were whales, and I had a small drawing pad full of whale pictures with facts from the internet. I was researching non-stop for hours on end whale facts, and my mom found it very cute, so she let me take that to school. And to my surprise, I wasn't bullied for it. Normally you get bullied when you have interesting, unusual interests, but this time I was actually met with sympathy from my schoolmates and the upper class people, the people who were in higher classes during the middle and elementary school. I was met with adoration, to be honest. They were finding it very cool, very cute at least. My teachers also did. They were also big fans of my drawings, and they also encouraged me to draw, so I was kind of lucky with that. I had a nice environment that was encouraging me to keep pursuing my hobby. But then I started to prepare for school, and because I had to prepare for the high school entrance exams, I had to take a break. And that break turned to actually about 3 years of drawing nothing, because I had to study as a kid. I was still a middle school kid, but that made my skills a little rusty, so I had to relearn how to draw everything. But at the end it all worked out, because I just liked doing what I did. So here I'm moving the camera a bit. Yeah. Now, as you see, the main body of this fish is done actually. The fish has a lot of stripes and a lot of little dots, little spots. And you can be very liberal with how you apply them, because this fish is just with random patterns in nature anyway. So just make them very reasonably thick, with thin and thick lines interchangeable. Do your best not to bury everything with the lines, because it has other details too. And one interesting thing about this fish is the lines about here, about its eye, start to turn. So from the center of the head it goes like this, and then it opens like a clam, and so you have to kind of pay attention to that. But other than that, there's not much going on with the fish. It's just cool and striped. Pay attention to the alternation of thick and thin lines. Make sure that you have a way to identify your thick and thin lines, So for example, my thick and thin lines, the thin ones are actually dark, and the thick ones are just two hollow lines side by side. Now this also resembles the actual design of this fish, as what I mean by design is how it is actually in nature. So this fish, beautiful fish, very ornate fish, it swims very slow, and it always is a marvel when you kind of get to see this in games, in nature. This is just something that you like to see. The stripes on the fins of the fish are kind of random, but what you need to pay attention is that they are mostly parallel to the body. They are very randomly shaped, irregular, but most of them go parallel to the body, and so there is no vertical line. It is always some wavy line that follows the main line of the body, the side line. And that is important because when you are drawing this fish, you want to have, you don't need to have too much accuracy, but still, if you want it to actually be identified when somebody looks at it as a lionfish, then you need some sort of semblance to the real thing, which lies on the details. So just putting the stripes down. The little details are a little easier, but also a little harder to put the stripes down on. So here I'm putting the stripes down, putting the stripes. I changed my mind, maybe I'm going to make the stripes alternate between light and dark instead of thick and thin, because then there's going to be too many lines. And the details need to be distinguishable, so here it goes. The little details getting filled in. One thing I like about drawing with graphite, drawing with mechanical pencils, is that you have the precision of a thin pen, but you don't have to stick with the mistakes you made. Now, there is always happy mistakes, like Bob Ross says, but you also should have the ability to have a second, third, fifth chance, because nothing in life is undoable, and you should always the tripod fell. Oops. Yeah, you should always give yourself another chance when you are drawing, so that you yourself can also make mistakes, because everyone does. He who doesn't say, I made a mistake, either hasn't tried or is lying. If you try, you make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you don't try. There's no other way. And mistakes are not something to be ashamed of. Everybody has their own thing going on, and nobody gets theirs going without at least trying and failing once. And I know of a nice anecdote, a nice saying that says, fail once, no matter, fail again, fail better. The thing that matters is you trying again, and again, and again. Because at some point, even if you don't really succeed in whatever you set out to do, you're going to progress in whatever you are interested in. And that in itself is as valuable as the destination you want to reach. And so, there is also beauty in just the trying itself. That's lost on the modern society a lot. But I believe it's still not completely forgotten by people. It's something still cherished by most, and something that people still give importance to. So here I am putting down the lines on the fins. The fins have these tip lines, but then it goes again kind of parallel to the body. This is a beautiful fish, but when you come across this, you should keep your respect and keep your distance and swim away, because this thing is poisonous. And as far as I remember, it's very dangerous when this thing gets too close or touches you. You should keep your distance to this thing. And that goes with a lot of things. You should keep your distance with a lot of animals. People are getting too comfortable. Like there was this, let's say, trend where people would walk up to beavers and just handle them, calling them bober. Yeah, they are bober if you are Polish. That just means beaver. But it disturbs the animal to a point because they're shy animals. And as far as I know, unlike a capybara or a marmot, these animals, these beavers, just want to be left alone and do their own dams and all things. Their beaver life should be left for the beavers themselves. And so whenever I see a new animal trend on TikTok, on Instagram, I kind of cringe because it is treating the animals as if they're spectacles made for the enjoyment of humans and humans only, and not living, breathing things with their own lives and minds and feelings, which they are. People are very, let's say, surprised when they learn that fish, for example, do have personalities and do have feelings. So as a kid, I was always getting fish. Especially, I was always falling. This tripod will be replaced. Anyway, as a kid, I was always getting fish because both my parents and I really liked fish because I was such a big champion of wildlife, of marine life at home, and watching so many documentaries back to back non-stop. My father also became a big fan of just anything sea life. So he would get a goldfish from time to time and we would raise it. And then at some point, I believe father was just taking it to some local lake that could have goldfish and just releasing them there. Which is very responsible. Nowadays, when I see someone doing animal reels and stuff on TikTok or something, people are always putting these fish in so small containers that it actually makes no sense when you think about it. For example, when you have a fighting Siamese betta fish and everybody says that fish is hardy, just put it in something that's a little bigger than a water container. Yeah, sure, it's going to survive the same way you would also stay alive if you were put in something that was about 5 square meters just to live there. If you were basically living in a capsule hotel non-stop, you would also survive. But would you want to be living that life? Because that's the life people are dooming these fish. And that disturbs me a lot because these are very friendly and surprisingly fun creatures to have around. For example, when you have betta fish, apart from you feeding them, they also learn your face. They swim up and get very excited. A lot of people deny or refuse to believe that fish can have personalities, but then you have YouTube channels like Brady Brandwood who took a normal dinner lobster and raised it, and that thing had a personality too. And so at some point it means to me that you don't really believe fish or stuff that isn't human don't have feelings or don't have intelligence. You just want to ignore them, to treat them whatever the way you want, which is usually not good. And that is disturbing to me because there's a lot of things going on. People are getting these pets just to put them on social media, and that's just sad because there's no respect left for that then. The animal just becomes another commodity that's going to be just sent back to wherever it came from whenever the trend dies, without any care about what it feels, what it lives, what experience it has. Although it is a real thing that's alive, although it's a fish, although it's a dog, although it's a beaver, although it's a bat, it still gets treated just like the 15 minutes of fame And after that 15 minutes is gone, that's a scary thought to have. So I'm putting the dots on the back fins. So what's fun about lionfish is the tail fin and the back fins have these little barbs with dots. And there's also here a fin that I have forgot that's also dotted, and it starts about here with relatively long fins like this. So the fish actually feel a lot like underwater airplanes. They have stabilizers, they have wings, and they are pretty much flying in water, which also works kind of similar to how flying in air works, because you just need to be buoyant, and the fish are basically air balloons with wings attached. They have something called the swim bladder, which they can inflate with air to rise and then to slowly sink. And actually, if you take a fish outside too fast, the swim bladder ruptures and the fish cannot adjust its altitude in the water anymore, and it dies because it literally cannot swim and it cannot get the depth it needs. And so the fish slowly just dies when you do that. One fun thing about this lionfish is the stripes around the main body area are very thick, and then they get very scarce around the tail. There is a lot more white around the tail than you'd see around the main body area. This fish is actually remarkably detailed. You don't expect, because you're just looking at it and saying like, okay, it's zebra-like fish, but there is a lot to it. And this also brings me to the other topic of attention to detail, because details matter a lot in life, in everything, and there's a lot of detail to be admired in nature. Wherever you turn your head, there's something that is very small but very interesting going on. When you look at an ant, it has small hairs on it, and those hairs are functional. They actually feel using them. When you look at a very small leaf mite, it actually makes silk like spider despite not even being visible to the human eye. And so you kind of start to have a wonder for the nature, at least I do. And you start watching all the small critters and the living things, and you start to enjoy just being in the nature without having anything to entertain you, because nature doesn't exist to be a source of entertainment, but rather a source of just admiration to me. When you check out everything and anything in nature, they're so fun to be around. They're so fun to observe and take notes of, and they actually teach you a lot. When you are watching how many times a bird tries to fly before it can, when you are watching how many big branches a beaver chews before it can actually have its dam, when you are watching how many times a giant bear tries to get a very small salmon and does it over and over and over, you learn what perseverance and hard work are. And you admire these animals, and you admire these plants, and you admire these fish, and you kind of start to have a great liking and also respect of nature. Not just as things to entertain your eye, but also things that have their own existence, have their own lives, have their own thoughts, have their own emotions, have their own plans. It may be however simple, but it never gives you the right to underestimate what wildlife has to offer. One thing I dislike is people calling animals dumb, because then you have to describe, okay, dumb like what? And they always go, oh, they can't read, they don't have thumbs, they can't use tools. But then you realize We only needed to do that because we didn't have any defenses. We had to think because otherwise we would be dead. These animals have poison, have claws, have very interesting abilities like flying very fast if you're a peregrine falcon, or swimming very deep if you're a whale. They always have something going for them, not like humans. Humans only had endurance, being very social, and that was pretty much it. We were defenseless, and so we had to think, we had to communicate, we had to do all kinds of sophisticated plans. And this doesn't make us more worthy of respect. This just makes us made different, the same way plants are made different, the same way a monkey cannot be a fish, but it would never want to be. Everything has its place. And so I believe that nature is something people should pay more attention to, because we are always surrounded by people and kind of forget how beautiful and how magical all the lectures, all the lessons, and just the great views nature can bring. So here the fish is done. The lionfish is all drawn, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. And if you liked it, please like, comment, subscribe, and wait for more videos.